Namaste children once again. After successfully completing the two lessons, now we are moving on to chapter number 3 in history. This chapter is kinship, caste and class, early societies from 6th century BC to 6th century CE or AD. The period is taken as same. In the previous chapter, we have learned the political and economic history of ancient India. Now from there, just we are moving on to the social history. From this chapter, we are going to learn some aspects of the Indian society which was developed how during the period from 6th century BC to 6th century AD. Now, let us move on to the tips one by one. And first, we will see some introductory notes. In the previous chapter, we saw that there were several changes in economic and political life between 600 BC to 600 CE. Some of these changes influenced the societies also. The extension of agriculture often emerged the distinct social groups and unequal distribution of wealth, which sharpened the social differences. In the previous chapter also, I have told you that when the agriculture was expanded further, the resources was expanded, when the population was increased, this led to a competition among the people. In turn, what happened? There was a rivalry among them. So what happened? The new or different social groups were emerged. And historians often used this textual tradition to understand this process. To understand about the social history, the historians normally use the textual or the literary sources. One thing we have to understand that when the course of history, when we are moving on to the next era, we are getting a lot of literary sources which is more convenient for us to get the real history. And some texts lay down the norms of social behavior also, how human being or the man in the society has to act. Certain rules were prescribed. And each text was written from the perspective of specific social category. And every text was prepared in terms of a particular social category also. So we need to keep in mind who composed and what and for whom. So when we are learning about these historical aspects through these texts, we have to understand who composed these texts, for what purpose they composed, and for whom they have done it. We also need to consider the language used and the ways in which the text which was circulated in the society, what language was used and how it was circulated among the people, whether all people were benefited or not. These aspects only we are going to study. But please keep it in mind that this chapter is mostly connected with what is known as some literary aspects as well as the social categorization of people of ancient India. Now, while learning about this period, one of the most important sources which are available for us is a colossal epic called the Mahabharata. The colossal epic means an epic of a great literary work which contain the acts, the heroes or the deeds of the heroes of the past. Now here Mahabharata is taking as one of the major source or literary source of information to take the society into account. Now let us see how it is going. The Mahabharata is a colossal epic which is running over 1 lakh verses with the depiction of the social categories and situations. That means plenty of social aspects and categorizations we can see from the Mahabharata. It was composed over a period of about 1,000 years. It is not a single day it was composed. The content of this Mahabharata was what is called, it was written the period after period. That is, the historians assess that for a period of 1,000 years it was used to compose. But the central story is about the two sets of warring cousins, that you know that the Pandavas and Kauravas. These two belong to the two Mahajanapadas only. So the central story is connected with these two warring groups only. The text also contains sections laying down norms of behavior for various social groups. The central theme is the warring group's history. At the same time, it is laying down certain social norms which required to be followed by the people in different sections of the society. Now, how this Mahabharata was edited? Of course, it was for a period of 1,000 years, it was compiled by different people and different section. But how we are getting in an edited form, in a compiled form? Now let us see that. So very, very important. Here you know that one of the most ambitious projects began in 1990, that is in the first quarter of the 20th century, was a critical edition of the Mahabharata under Indian Sanskritists, whose name is called, he's a Sanskrit scholar, whose name is called V.S. Suktangar, with a team of dozens of scholars. It was under the able guidance and leadership of Sri V.S. Suktangar, along with his number of followers and teammates, they made an attempt to edit this Mahabharata into a present one. The team collected a variety of scripts from different parts of the country. Then they worked out a method of comparing these verses from each manuscript. My dear children, we have to understand that Mahabharata was not written in a particular spot. And connected with this central story, it was spread out in different parts of the country, and the historians collected data from different areas. And the project took for a period of 47 years to complete. That is an amazing work done under the leadership of this Sanskrit scholar V.S. Suktangar. There were several common elements in the Sanskrit version of the story found all over the subcontinent, from Kashmir and Nepal in the north to Kerala and Tamil Nadu in the south. My dear children, they have collected information, but the several common elements what they found, it was collected from different parts of the country, from Kashmir to Nepal on those area towards the end of Kerala. That means covering almost all parts. They have taken a period of 47 years to collect the evidences of this Mahabharata. Ultimately, they selected the verses that appeared common and published these several volumes in and running over into 13,000 pages. Finally, they collected and compiled and made it into 13,000 pages of a document. See how great it is, the edition of Mahabharata. The variations were documented in footnotes and appendices in the main text. What do you mean? And the common elements they have taken for compiling. If at all anything, if they are finding which is differing from the common elements, that they are giving at the bottom of the page with the footnotes. And normally these texts were written in Sanskrit by and for the Brahmins. It was written by Brahmins. It was written for the Brahmin people. When the issue of social history were explored in the 19th and 20th centuries, they tended to take these texts at face value, believing that everything that was laid down in these texts was actually practiced. My dear children, during the 19th and 20th century, when social history was explored or studied by scholars in more into accounts, they tended to take these texts as a face value, because for learning the main social history of India, they have taken Mahabharata as the face value or the most important document to derive the history of the past India. But subsequently, the scholars began studying the other traditions also in the language of Pali. Pali means it is a common language used by Buddhists. The Prakriti and the Tamil language, which indicate that the ideas contained in Sanskrit texts were recognized as authoritative, but they were also questioned and occasionally even rejected also. Of course, they have taken the Sanskrit version of Mahabharata at the face value. At the same time, when they were analyzing certain documents in other languages, they could find out that, of course, the Sanskrit version of Mahabharata was accepted as authoritarian. At the same time, they could found that there are some other categories, those people, they could question the validity of this texts, and they have their own traditions also. Now, one of the most important aspect, now this chapter we are going to analyze about the social customs, how it was there. As you know that the family is the unit of every society. So how this family was emerged in the Indian society, now let us see that. The family vary in terms of the number of its members, their relationship. Of course, we can also see that the families are different. It can be a nuclear or a joint family. That depends on the number of people. Often people belonging to the same family shared the food and other resources and live and work and perform their rituals together. That also, you know, that the families normally they share the same food, share the same customs, belief, practices, etc. Now, when the large network of families comes together, it is called the kinfolk. It is called the kinfolk. That means a large number of family coming and settled together. The familial ties are often based on the blood relation. That also we know. Historians collect the information about the elite families very easily. Why? Elite families are rich families. Because rich families, they keep records. But it is more difficult to reconstruct the ordinary people. In the previous chapter, we have studied that they were not in the habit of keeping the records. Now, the two important terminologies that we have to study from this chapter in connection with the family is the ideals of patrilineal and matrilineal. Now, let us see what are the meanings of these two terms. The patrilineal. The patrilineal means tracing descent from father to son, grandson, and so on. Under patrilineal, the son could claim the resources. It is possible that these attitudes were shared by wealthy men and Brahmanas, but not unique with exception. My dear children, the patrilineal means the relationship is moving from father to son, grandson, etc. and so on. Here, one of the most important thing is that after the death of father, the property has to be shared by son only, not by daughter. This is a kind of gender forming of the society. Right. But it is believed that this patrilineal system was mostly used by the wealthy men only, but it is not unique. They followed everywhere. There are exceptions. Now, regarding matrilineal, just opposite. If patrilineal is moving from father to son, here the term used when descent is traced through the mother. That means from mother to daughter, daughter to granddaughter, like that. Now, another aspects of the early Indian social system was the rules of marriage. You know how the rules of marriage were practiced by the ancient Indian society. That is very interesting to note. Now here, as far as marriage is concerned, while sons were the important for the continuity of patrilineage, that means even after the marriage, son will be retained in their own family. Daughters were viewed rather differently and no claims to the resources of the household. And moreover, marrying them into families outside the kin was considered very desirable. They cannot get married within the family. They have to get married outside of their kin. And this system, if they are getting married outside, is called as exogamy. Then another important aspect regarding the marriage was the Kanyadana, now what we say as the dowry or the gift of a daughter in marriage, which was an important religious duty of father at the time of marriage. They have to give something. That gift they will carry out when they are going to husband home. With the emergence of new towns, this may have led to questioning of early beliefs and practices. If it is questioning, means questioning the Brahminical people. So faced with this challenge, the Brahmins laid down certain code of social behavior in great detail. So what they did in order to face this challenge, the Brahmins From 500 BC onwards, certain norms were compiled in Sanskrit texts. It is known as Dharma Sutras and Dharma Shastra. And one of the most important of such work is called as the Manusmriti. This already we have mentioned about that. The Brahmins claimed that their views had to be obeyed by everybody. But the real social relationship was more complicated if we are going into a deep analysis. So here the rules of marriage, we have to consider that as far as marriage is concerned, the son can retain his life in his own family, but a girl has to get married outside of their kin. At the time of marriage only they will be getting some gift in the form of Kanyadana. When many parts of the country it was faced with this challenge, immediately the Brahmins, they have changed their attitude by implementing certain norms in the form of Dharma Shastra and Dharma Sutra. Through this Dharma Shastra and Dharma Sutra, they tried to reintroduce or reinstate their authority over the society. And one such important work is called Manusmriti. Through this, the Brahmins made it very clear that these rules are to be obeyed by everybody. But when we are going into a deep analysis about this system, we can understand that the society is much more than complicated. Now, let us see that there are 8 forms of marriage normally existed in the ancient form of society. Of this, how? You need not go into detail about that one by one, but we have to generally understand something. The Dharma Shastra and Dharma Sutras, they recognized as many as 8 forms of marriage. Of these, the first 4 were considered as goods, while the remaining were condemned. That means the condemned one must be utilized by the other people like untouchables. It is possible that these were practiced by those who did not accept the Brahminical norms. And reference, the source is there in the chapter, you can go through for that. Now, another important aspect of the social segregation or the classification of the society was the Gotra of women. How a Gotra was prescribed for women class. Now let us see. One Brahminical practice to classify the people was in terms of Gotra. Every people will be categorized in terms of their Gotra. Each Gotra was named after a Vedic seer. All those who belonged to the same Gotra were regarded as his descendants, quite naturally. Same Gotra people, they will be considered as the descendants of the next generation. There were 2 rules about the Gotra which were particularly important. What are the 2 rules of Gotra? Women were expected to give up their father's Gotra and adopted husband on marriage. That means after marriage they have to adopt the next Gotra, not for men. Members of the same Gotra could not marry. Members of the same Gotra could not marry. But here also some exception we can see. The Shadabahana rulers were the ladies. They accepted their own Gotra instead of adopting names derived from the husband's Gotra as per the Brahminical rules. That means we have to understand that even though the Brahminical theory was highly authoritative, it was not commonly accepted everywhere in the country. Now let us see that some social differences, how people are categorized. After Gotra, now we are seeing another area of classification. One of the most central point of the social difference is, as you know, even in the present system, is the caste-based division. Now, how this casteism was existing there? The castes. It refers to a set of hierarchically ordered social categories. A social category which is keeping its hierarchical order. It was laid down in the Dharma Sutras and Dharma Shastra. All these Dharma Shastra and Dharma Sutras were introduced for these kind of segregation only. The Brahmins claimed that they were ranked first in this order, was divinely ordained, while placing groups, the Shudras or the untouchables were at the very bottom of the social order. The position within the order were determined by birth. This is the caste segregation. Now, the casteism was emerged as or created on the basis of hierarchically ordered social setup. Of this caste division, the Brahmins were considered at the top and the untouchables were at the bottom level. So these kind of segregations were also introduced through the Dharma Shastra and Dharma Sutra. That means the caste system was emerged or defined through the Dharma Shastra and the Dharma Sutra only we can mostly seen from the ancient Indian society. Now, another categorization, how this caste is related with your occupation. You know that a particular caste will take out a particular occupation. That means the occupational structure is also going to link with the casteism. Now, let us see. The Dharma Sutras and Dharma Shastras contains rules about the ideal occupation of 4 categories, or it is otherwise called as a Varna. You know that the human being, the Brahmanical theory, they divide the people into 4 categories according to the type of occupations carried out by a particular group. Now let us see that as per these norms, the occupational structure, accordingly, the Brahmanas were supposed to study and teach Vedas and perform sacrifices and give and receive gift. That is the main duty. That means here they keep our Brahmins at the top level and they are supposed to learn and teach Vedas and receive and give gifts. The second category, just below Brahmin, the second category, it is called the Kshatriyas. They were to engage in warfare, protect the people and administer justice, study Veda, get sacrifices performed and make gift. That means the Kshatriyas were the warring group, they are mostly the ruling class. It is their duty to make arrangement for the sacrifices and conduct sacrifices and also making gift for the Brahmins. The last 3 occupations were assigned to the Vaishya, the third group, who were the expected to engage in agriculture, pastoralism and trade. This is the occupation of what is called the Vaishyas. At last, the Shudras, they were assigned only one occupation, that of serving the 3 higher Varnas. My dear children, how the Varna system was practiced? The Varna system in ancient India was practiced in terms or in tune with the occupational structure of the people. As per this, there were 4 Varnas, the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. The Brahmins at the top, they will be engaging in learning and teaching Vedas. The second one, the Kshatriya, they are the very powerful and warring class and protect the people. And the third one is the Vaishya, they are mainly engaged in agriculture and trade. And finally, the Shudras are untouchable. They have to what is called serving for the next 3 higher categories. This is the way the occupational structures are maintained. Our discussions are not over, but for today, I am going to wind up the lecture, and tomorrow I will come up with the next part of this lesson. Thank you.